I'm taking you behind the scenes on a secret seminar that I hosted just for Hyrox athletes right before a race in Chicago. In sports like Hyrox or CrossFit, the rowing machine and the skier can both be incredibly useful tools, and as you've probably found out, you might not win the workout with those machines, but you can probably lose them if you don't know what you're doing. And therein lies the secret sauce as to what is happening with these machines. Why can they set you back? And that's what we're going to explore in today's video. I'm going to take you through some of the secrets to success as to what you can do to clear out any issues you might have going into the rowing machine and using it for competition.
Okay, so, man, with this tight a timeline and tons of you guys to run through, I want to give you guys as practical an approach as we can. So let's start with this, because we talked about it earlier. Quick release. Does that sound like something we'd be interested in? Because we can shave off at least like 5-7 seconds just learning how to get in and out of the machine appropriately. So let's just start with that, because that's useful. So first off, odds that you want to take the time to adjust the foot stretchers when you get to your machine. At the end of the day, what we talk about as a primary target for the straps is that they're running across the widest part of your foot. So if you are looking to optimize your setup when you get on there, that's what you're shooting for. So obviously know what that is ahead of time, know how many open holes you have here so that you can save yourself as much time as possible. The time in which I would say it may be necessary to make an adjustment is if, for example, somebody with tiny feet was in and you're up here, right? What happens when that foot gets too high is it starts to impinge your hip angle, and that is going to get really uncomfortable as you move through the row. Right? We could probably get away with a foot that's too low because you still have a good hip opening in the crease here. And that's going to give you plenty of room to come in and get into a good loaded position. But if the foot's really high, like if I get into my station and this is what I see, I'm going to have to take the time to drop it so that I'm comfortable. Otherwise, my hip flexors are going to be toast by the time I'm done. So with that being said, once we get into the machine, get the straps relatively tight. And this is where the quick release is going to come in handy, is it allows you to still have tight straps and not have to live with a totally loose strap to come into. The quick release, for whether you are doing it on your own or whether you're with a pair, is fairly simple in concept, but difficult in execution the first time you do it. So we're going to go through a couple reps of it so you guys get comfortable with it. You're going to take your hands and you're going to grab the actual plastic of the foot stretchers. Thumb is going to go on the buckle. Okay? From here, you're going to push the buckle out. That's simple enough, and that's where most people stop, right? We do that, and we like try and worm our way out. Inevitably, a heel gets caught or something like that. The difference, the only stage that we do past that, is we push the buckle out, but then we anchor the plastic buckle there and pull our toes to our face. And that single difference of holding the buckle there and pulling the toes gives you all this room where now you're up and out. Next person comes in. They're not going to deal with the straps being in the way. They can grab, tighten, and they're off. So if you are transitioning with somebody, that is going to save you a ton of time. And especially if the two of you can practice that together, where you are off the machine, stepping off to one side, next person is stepping off, or stepping in from that opposite side, you're going to be able to work down to a pretty quick transition. When I was on teams, we got to the point where we were about 5 seconds per transition doing it that way, right? So you can get very efficient, but an inefficient transition might be 15, 20 seconds, depending on if somebody decides to adjust the actual foot stretcher height, if they get stuck and then they stop and they have to do each one at a time. So it's useful to have in your back pocket. And once you learn it, there's really no reason to ever get off and on the machine any other way.
I would say, like, in that case, you could actually switch more than twice. Because the only reason, like, we would switch twice is because, like, we wasted time. But think about how much more rest you get if you have one more rest period, you know?
Yeah.
So I would say practice and see what you're
And then
doing.
the only other problem is she's like a size like 4.
Yeah, right.
I have normal size.
And that's where playing to the bigger foot is probably going to be advantageous, right? Play to the biggest foot of the group. If she has to row with the strap, around her toes, that's going to be okay still because, again, It all comes down to just that hip angle. When we actually get into that compressed position, we want to optimize that hip angle. The more open we are, the more comfortable we're going to be. The only thing that'll change is that the lower your feet go, the more you start to put a vertical drive into the stroke. And when we put a vertical drive into the stroke, that increases our chances for jumping off the seat. Right? Because if you look at the way this foot stretcher is angled, we have a horizontal force and a vertical force, because it's at 45 degrees. So if I push through the ball of my foot, I'm pushing back. If I push through my heel, I'm standing up. And so one of the reasons we find this target for the strapping across the widest part of the foot is because that gives us the ability to start on the ball of the foot and then place the heel later in the stroke, or even right after we drive. Is because we're trying to optimize that vertical and horizontal force production. But if we optimize too hard to one, then we lose out on the other. If I go too hard into the heel, if I smash my heel down right away, I'm probably going to jump up and off the seat and land on the rail, which is both going to hurt, not be fun to recover from, and also you're going to lose a lot of time. Right? Does that make sense? Okay, so practical application time. Let's just give you a chance to play with this quick release. Fair? Okay, so let's get 6 people on the machine. I'm going to walk you through it. Any 6 people are welcome. 3, 2, 1, go.
I thought I told them I came from my spot. They told me time is like money, that's why I done made it. I sweated, I'm spending a lot.
Whose brain exploded and they completely forgot what they were supposed to do? Nailed it. Okay. Fair? Okay. First group on the machine.
But I swear that I'm bad. Go and ask anybody, put a city on the map. They was trying to call when they sent a contract, but I never reply unless they send it for the max. Everything I said, man, they know it's all facts. Told them if they want a verse, and they go and get text. Told them last year that I'm coming for it all. Go and check the numbers, dog, I'm putting up stats. Yeah. I'm on my prime, I'm feeling like Steph.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Obviously, I know the points of the performance are the same, but anthropometrically speaking, like you're just going to row faster than me if we're.
I'm a bigger lever.
Intensity.
Yeah.
So, like, do you have any recommendations for a shorter person?
Yeah. So it's an excellent question, right? Because like anatomically, I can't change you. I can't like stretch you. Nor would I want to, because you're way more efficient at some things than I am because you have shorter levers, right? It's just that on here, the bigger lever has the advantage. The objective is to work with the levers that you have and to optimize them. So the things that will make it even harder on a shorter athlete is not focusing on a leg push that then relays into a hip swing that then translates into a snap of the arms, because you shorten yourself when you do this big, like, blah, everything opens at the same time stroke. And so, no pun intended, you sell yourself short on what you can do, right? Like everything opens at the same time. Well, you lose the ability to lengthen the ability to put force through each of those phases of the stroke. And so your target is thinking, all right, how do I optimize as long of a leg push as I can? And how long can I wait before I need to then swing my trunk? And how long can I swing my trunk then before I snap my arms? So you almost have to think even more about it than I do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Because there's no, like, do any of you guys know Josh Bridges? Yeah. Okay, so Josh and I, he was at Invictus way back when, and so we trained together a lot. And one of my favorite moments, because I worked with him quite a bit before, it was like the 2010 games or something like that, 2011 games maybe. He's not a tall dude, right? And rowing showed up at regionals in a big way that year. But we'd been working together for about 6 months. Just, obviously it's not the priority. Rowing is never the priority, it's just the accessory. But we made sure that we were focusing on each of the phases of his stroke. And when we got to regionals with rowing showing up, I think it was like multiple 1,000-meter rows, he was at the top of the pack in that workout because he was one of the most efficient guys out there and was able to stick with everybody else that was in his heat. They may have passed him a little on the row, but he was able to save so much energy on the row without having to panic and without having to try and just crank it for everything it was worth, that when it came to the other phases of the workout, he was still strong. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And this all comes back to that we're not going to win it here, but we can lose it, right? We're not trying to prioritize this thing. We're just trying to say, how can we spend less energy doing the same? Or if we want to add more energy, that we get more output out of it. Fair?
I think it's like such a good point, because like a lot of people will just throw it away as like, I'm never gonna be a good rower, and you look at time, like you'll try to like match the time, and like it'll blow you up, right? And you like same thing with running. It's like someone's like, I'm never gonna be a good runner. Why should I work on mechanics? I need to get faster, 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 and they spend all this energy like trying to work on like the capacity when it's like if you just can be efficient, like you can save a lot of energy. Even if like you are slower, like it could be like 60% of your effort to like someone else's that's taller. They're going 100%. You know what I mean? But and they're like you save 40% efficiency. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I've been lucky to work with you on your videos for years, and one of the things that you helped me a ton with was rowing at a lower stroke rate.
Yeah.
And can you kind of touch on how that might help Hyrox in terms of if you're rowing at a 150 pace, but you're doing it at 20 strokes per minute as compared to doing it at 32 strokes per minute, what where the benefit would come for us?
Yeah, so it all comes back to that slow is smooth, smooth is fast, right? The fastest way to not be able to learn a movement is to try and do it as quick as possible all the time. The only way you can really focus on something is when you slow it down. So with the way that I teach, I try to bring stroke rates way down and make it uncomfortably slow. Like we're working stroke rates 16 to like 22 for a long time. To get you really comfortable adapting to putting power into the machine rather than using rate to try and find power. Because when you can deliver power, now it becomes a control mechanism. So now I get to say, I want to put in 60, I want to put in 80 or 50 or 100. But I know what my variance is rather than only having 0 and go, right? We need an in-between. And so your question, how is that applicable here, right? If I'm at a 20 or do I have to be at a 35? It's that you want to have the control to choose your rate, not be stuck at a rate that you have to go at because it's the only gear you've got, right? The more you learn about this movement, you're adding gears to your gearbox. You're learning, how do I shift? How do I actually use them so that if you get to the row, you're like, ooh, I got to make up a little time here. Maybe there's a guy or gal that you know, and they're in your heat, and you want to make sure that you like put the pressure on a little bit. Well, now you can, because you're doing it intentionally rather than unconsciously. That makes sense? And if you get into the station with somebody and you're like, I know that I can like cruise at a 150 pace at a 20, and you look next to you and the person's at a 150, but they're at a 32, you're like, cool. I don't want to go faster because I know that I'm going to get off at the same time. This person's going to be toast, and I'm going to be ready to go. How many of you guys know the CrossFit workout Jackie? Okay, so 1,000-meter row, 50 thrusters with an empty barbell and 30 pull-ups. One of the best tactics that you can learn for that workout is to take your final 100 meters and just turn off. Don't even attempt to row fast in the final 100 meters. Why? Because you're not going to make up any time in that final 100 meters. But if you cruise, I'll be cooking at a, I don't know, let's call it a 140. I typically row like a 140 in Jackie. So I'll row 140. Final 100 meters, I'm at like 250. Because I don't care. The amount of time that somebody's going to make up on me in that final 100 doesn't matter because they're going to push through me. They may get off a second faster, but I'm going to step off. My heart rate's going to be lower. My breathing rate's going to be in control. I'm able to walk up to that barbell and just start cranking out thrusters because I'm relaxed and I'm chilled out. I didn't try to win the workout on the row. I just managed it. And that's what we're trying to do here. Learn to manage each of these machines. That's it. Cool? All right, I got to get you guys to this gear because that was purely tactical. Now let's take a look at how we actually move on this machine. And one of the greatest pieces that I could probably impart to you guys is that we want to treat this machine as a push instead of a pull. Okay, we are always trying to push the stroke rather than pull the handle to us. And what I mean by that is that our legs are the biggest driver of force in our body. Yeah? Everybody agree with that? Okay, so if I'm cranking this handle thinking pull, what's the thing that we usually pull with? Our arms or our legs? Just subconsciously. If you tell somebody to pull, you're probably going to try and pull with your arms. You're not gonna, those of us that like understand anatomy are like, well, I would pull my hamstring, like really like, right? But when we subconsciously think pull, it's usually arms. But if we think push, we are often thinking, okay, I can actually get my legs into this now. We may think of push-up, but the objective here is that we are able to push the machine away from us using our legs and anchoring our trunk as we do so, okay? So as I get into the stroke, again, with our limited time, let me go over a quick checklist of what a perfect catch position looks like. That is the loaded position of the stroke, because if we get the catch right, then we can get the rest of the stroke right. If the catch is in a poor position, it's going to be really tough to take a good stroke. So a good catch is basically a checklist that just walks anatomically from your hands down to your feet. All right, what that looks like is that my hands are nice and wide on the handle. From there, my wrists are neutral, elbows are extended, shoulders are reaching. With the shoulders reaching, I want to get down and into my lats without retracting my shoulders. Do you see how much length gets lost from when I'm protracted to retracted? So I want a protracted shoulder, but I want the lats engaged, because that lat is going to be my connection point to hang. Right? That's going to allow me to hang without needing to engage my head, neck, and posterior chain to try and drive connection to the machine. If we go back to what I said earlier when I was standing up at the front of the room, right, we're always trying to simply establish tension on the handle so that we can apply force. Right? We don't want to take ourselves out of a good anatomical position to find that connection, but we often do when we don't understand how to move on this machine, because we're just throwing spaghetti at the wall, trying to figure out how can I find tension in any way possible. It's just what we do. We're trying to find the most efficient path as a human mover, right? So what we're looking for here, again, wrists neutral, elbows extended, shoulders protracted, but lats engaged. My trunk then is going to be at a forward angle of 1 o'clock or 11, depending on which side of the room you're on, okay? I'm going to brace and have a nice neutral spine. I don't need to be overextended and totally rigid, but I definitely don't want to be rounded sitting in the catch position here. So a nice neutral spine. That's going to put my hips behind my shoulders, not stacked on top. If your shoulders are ever stacked on top of your seat, you're in the wrong position. Something has gone wrong, right? We always want to make sure that, notice too, when I push the seat back, it puts my heels down, which is good for now, for the learning process. We want to be able to keep that heel down as opposed to lifting that heel, because often when the heel gets lifted, the seat slides forward. That takes me into a poor position. I'm unloading the spring when I do this. But when I put the heels down, that loads me, okay? So spine neutral, lats engaged, knees tracking underneath the arms, heels down, and then I get as compressed as I can from here. Because in this position, I have a ton of potential energy. I am a loaded spring, ready to unload. It's uncomfortable to sit in this catch position when you're tight. When you're loaded, sitting here for a long time is horrible, okay? So from this position, I mentioned that we want to focus on a push. I am locking in through the trunk and the lats, and I am then placing my foot and pushing through the midfoot down and into this foot stretcher in an attempt to almost push that machine across the room in front of me. That would be the ideal, is that I could actually push that machine away from me as opposed to pulling the handle to me. Does that look different to you guys? All right. There's a big difference between staying loaded and hanging off of the handle and letting these big, strong legs do the work, as opposed to cranking the head open, leaning with the shoulders, and falling away from the stroke because I'm pulling. When I do that, I essentially remove my legs from the equation. And listen, I know the legs get torched in a Hyrox event, right? You're doing a lot with the legs. But that's why finding efficiency of this movement is so important, is because we're not trying to prioritize it. We're just trying to figure out, how can I move better with good mechanics so that I don't have to spend energy doing this? Because when I lead with the head, lead with the shoulders, I put a ton into the back. I start to torch the back by doing that. As well, I'm probably going to be torching the biceps, because that comes typically with a big arm pull. So from that catch position, again, I'm loaded in. I'm pushing the machine away first with the legs. Once that leg is about to finish, then I create a whip into the hip. That allows me to transfer and relay that trunk strength into the swing. And then I snap the arms at the end as the icing on the cake. Right? The arms really are just like the end of the stroke. And from here, we learn how to put force into the machine rather than needing to take rate up in order to go fast. Does this look familiar? Right? I'm just spinning my wheels. I'm like a hamster on an out of control hamster wheel when I do that. As opposed to being intentional about the way that I deliver force into the machine. Because when I'm doing this, I can control my heart rate. I can make sure that it's not running out of control. I'm delivering as much force as I want. I'm not just delivering all the force I have to give. I know how to give 60% versus 100% or 70% versus 100%.
I was just going to ask you, do you find that it's going to be so much easier than to focus on the breathing, right? And you're going to breathe every, say, 2 strokes or 3 strokes, because the other way, that more erratic way, the efficient way, you're going to become more erratic with your breathing.
Yeah, and the upside to this, as humans, we strive to find rhythm, consciously or unconsciously. Perfect example, if I'm walking down the sidewalk, I have a very natural breathing rate that goes with a walking cadence. If I all of a sudden, if a dog runs around the corner and starts chasing me, I'm going to break into a sprint. But is my breathing rate going to stay at a walking breathing rate? No, it's going to come up to meet my movement rate. So if I can learn how to control my breath and my movement, now I can keep my heart rate lower. I can stay in control. Right? It's very hard to have a high breathing rate and a relaxed movement rate, and vice versa. One has to come to join the other. Right? So if you are rowing with that head first, leaning with the shoulders, just taking 36 strokes a minute, your breathing rate has to come up to join it. You're not going to have this really relaxed breathing rate. Right? Does that make sense? So, okay, with our time, I would like to give you guys at least one chance to get on, work on a catch position. So I'm going to have to do this pretty quick with you. Work on a good catch position and then give you at least a few strokes to try and feel what does it feel like with a good catch position to now brace and push through the legs, prioritizing a leg push rather than an arm pull. Fair?
Taking in this information is one thing, but putting it into action is a whole different ballgame. And that means that you need to consistently revisit these concepts so that you can make sure you implement them into your training and your competitions. So make sure that you subscribe so that you stay up to date on the latest coaching when it comes to the rowing machine, the ski erg, the bike erg, so that when it shows up in your competition, you are set and ready to go.